In the dust of a Zagros Mountain cave, archaeologists carefully brush away the sediment of 40,000 years. They uncover the bones of a Neanderthal, an ancient human who lived and died during the harshest rigors of the last ice age. But as the full skeleton emerges, a story of incredible trauma is revealed. A crushing blow delivered in his youth had fractured the skull around his left eye, almost certainly leaving him partially blind. His right arm was withered and useless, broken in multiple places, and never fully healing. His feet were twisted by fractures, and his entire skeleton was riddled with the agony of degenerative arthritis. According to the unwritten laws of a brutal, prehistoric world, this individual was a dead man. In a life defined by the daily struggle for food and the constant threat of predators, a person so severely disabled would have been a liability, unable to hunt, unable to defend himself, unable even to keep pace with his nomadic group. His story should have ended the day he was so grievously wounded. The cold calculus of survival dictates that he would have been left behind, his bones scattered by hyenas within a week. And yet, that is not what the evidence shows. The bones tell a different, impossible story. They show healing. The skull fracture had sealed over. The joints bore the scars of decades of painful use after the initial injuries. This man didn't die in days or weeks. He lived on, a crippled and broken member of his clan, for another 15 or 20 years. This presents us with a profound mystery. In the unforgiving world of the caveman, where only the strong were thought to survive, how did this one helpless man endure for so long? Who kept him alive? The skeleton from that cave doesn't just challenge our understanding of one man's life, it challenges the entire story we've been told about our ancient ancestors. Think of the classic caveman. The image that comes to mind is often one of brute force and primal instinct. It's a popular image of fur-clad monsters clubbing mammoths, dragging women by the hair, and living a life governed by the simple, cruel logic of survival of the fittest. We picture a world where there was no room for sentiment, no space for weakness. In this imagined past, compassion was a fatal luxury. This stereotype is precisely what makes the man in the cave such a staggering anomaly. His survival spits in the face of that brutish caricature. If Paleolithic life was nothing more than a constant, violent struggle for dominance, then his clan should have abandoned him without a second thought. His continued existence was a drain on their precious resources. He was another mouth to feed that could not hunt, another body to protect that could not fight. According to the myth, his story makes no sense. But what if the myth is wrong? Contrary to these popular portrayals, Paleolithic social life was incredibly rich and complex. To solve the riddle of the man who lived, we have to look at the archaeological record with fresh eyes, moving past the stereotype of the primitive ancestor. The evidence reveals a truth that hardly captures the complexity of their daily existence. The answer to how this man survived lies not in his own strength, but in the strength of his community. It tells a story not of a fur-clad brute, but of a cooperative and remarkably adaptable human, capable of far more than we've ever given them credit for. To truly understand the miracle of this one man's survival, we must first understand the world he woke up in every single day. His existence wasn't lived in a temperate paradise. It was often set against the backdrop of the Ice Ages, a time when vast glaciers covered much of Europe and Asia. Survival in this harsh, frozen landscape demanded relentless effort and ingenuity. For all Paleolithic peoples, life was a full-time occupation dedicated to one thing: acquiring food through a combination of hunting animals and gathering wild plants. This was their primary job, from sunup to sundown. The daily hunt was an exercise in extreme danger, requiring immense skill and precise coordination. Men armed with simple wooden spears or stone-tipped projectiles would face animals many times their size. This was a world of risk, and failure had deadly consequences. A hunt wasn't always successful, making the threat of starvation a constant, gnawing reality. Every shadow could hide a predator, and the nightly fire was not just a comfort, but a critical shield against the things that stalked the darkness. This was the reality of their world, a delicate balance of resourcefulness, endurance, and luck. Now, place the man from the cave back into this picture. A man who could not lift a spear, who could not outrun a predator, who could not carry his own water or forage for his own food. In this brutal arena of survival, every instinct tells us he should have been the first to fall. His continued existence defies the very logic of this dangerous world. The question is no longer just how he survived his injuries, but how he survived a single day in a world that was actively trying to kill him. Let's return to the man in the cave. To see the world through his eyes is to see it in half. The vision from his left eye was long gone, a dark void where a crushing blow had shattered his face. Imagine the constant phantom ache from a right arm that hung limp and useless at his side. The muscles atrophied, the bone twisted from a poorly healed break. Every movement, every step on his fractured feet would have sent waves of sharp, grinding pain through his body from the severe arthritis that gripped his joints. This wasn't a life of quiet dignity. It was a daily existence defined by pain and helplessness. Think of the essential tasks that filled the hours for our Paleolithic ancestors. He could not have joined the hunt for large animals, an activity that demanded considerable skill and coordination from every participant. He could not have spent his time manufacturing and maintaining the group's essential tools, a constant job that required two strong hands for hours of careful, detailed work. The simple act of butchering an animal with cutting implements or using grinding stones to process seeds would have been impossible for him. He was a man stripped of his ability to provide. Every sunrise brought with it a fresh wave of dependence. Every piece of roasted meat he ate, every sip of water he drank, every scrap of hide that kept him warm, had to be given to him by another. He was a permanent patient, a soul living entirely at the mercy of his clan. In a world that demanded strength, he had none. In a world that required self-sufficiency, he was utterly dependent. The mystery of his survival deepens, becoming more personal. It's no longer a question of facts and bones, but one of flesh and blood. How does a man so broken navigate even a single day, let alone decades? The answer to how this broken man survived is, in fact, remarkably simple. Yet it changes everything we think we know about our ancestors. He survived because he was not alone. His continued existence was not a fluke of nature. It was a deliberate act of community, a daily routine of compassion repeated for years. This wasn't a single act of pity. The archaeological record is clear. Several Paleolithic skeletons have been discovered showing healed serious injuries or long-term disabilities, which is direct evidence of community support for those unable to contribute fully to subsistence activities. Imagine the scene each day. When the hunters returned, their success was not their own. Sharing food was a fundamental part of their society. As the community gathered around the hearth, a portion of the day's bounty would have been brought to him, perhaps already cooked and prepared. When the band moved camp, following the herds or the seasons, he was not left behind. A hand would have taken his, guiding his faltering steps across the treacherous terrain. At night, he would have been given a place near the central fire, the heart of their home, which offered not just warmth but crucial protection from predators. These were not random acts of kindness. They were a system of care woven into the very fabric of their daily lives. For the man from the cave, survival was a group project. His weakness did not condemn him. It instead activated the profound social bonds that held his small band together. The mystery of his survival is solved not by looking at him, but by looking at the ghosts of those who surrounded him, whose tireless daily efforts kept the flame of his life from being extinguished. His every breath for 20 years was a testament to their humanity. But the physical act of providing food and shelter is only the beginning of this story. The care they gave was even more sophisticated than we could have imagined. In recent years, scientists have developed new ways to look into the past, and one of the most remarkable is the study of ancient dental calculus, the hardened plaque on teeth that acts as a microscopic time capsule. Inside this plaque, researchers have made an incredible discovery. Studies of dental calculus from Paleolithic teeth revealed traces of numerous plant species, including various medicinal plants. More than just food, the evidence for medicine and healing practices comes from these plant residues with medicinal properties found in their teeth. This discovery changes everything. It suggests our ancestors possessed a working knowledge of pharmacy. Their understanding of the natural world was incredibly deep, a sophisticated ecological knowledge passed down through generations. This wasn't just about knowing which berries were safe to eat. It was about knowing which leaves could reduce a fever, which roots could soothe a wound, and which barks could ease a constant, agonizing pain. Now, think again of the man in the cave, his body racked with crippling arthritis. The members of his clan weren't just feeding a helpless man. It's likely they were actively treating him. They were using their vast plant knowledge to manage his symptoms and ease his suffering. This was not just compassion, it was medicine. It reframes the entire scene. We are no longer looking at simple caretakers, but at primitive doctors and nurses, working tirelessly to make the life of their patient more bearable. The mystery of their society deepens, revealing a layer of cognitive and emotional complexity we are only just beginning to understand. As compelling as one story might be, it's easy to dismiss it as an outlier, a single, unexplainable act of kindness in an otherwise brutal world. But the man from the cave is not an anomaly. He is not a fluke. He is, in fact, one piece of a much larger puzzle. And when we look across the archaeological record, a clear and undeniable pattern begins to emerge. From the plains of Europe to the caves of the Near East, we find his story echoed in the bones of others. The evidence is now overwhelming. Several Paleolithic skeletons show evidence of healed serious injuries or long-term disabilities, indicating community support for those unable to contribute fully to subsistence activities. Archaeologists have unearthed the remains of other individuals who, by all logic, should not have survived. We find the elderly who lived for years after losing all their teeth, unable to chew tough meat or fibrous plants on their own. They must have been provided with softer, prepared foods. We find children born with congenital defects who were not abandoned but were allowed to grow into adolescence, supported by their clan. Each of these discoveries, on its own, is a touching story. But taken together, they are a powerful scientific data set. This is not the story of one compassionate family. This is a widespread pattern of behavior that spanned thousands of years and vast geographical distances. It tells us that this deep-seated instinct to care for the vulnerable was not an exception to the rule. It was the rule. This was a fundamental part of their culture, a behavior so deeply ingrained that we see its traces time and time again. The question we must now ask is no longer if they cared for their weak and dying, but why? Why was this compassion so vital to their way of life? The question of why they would expend so much energy on the helpless seems to defy the cold logic of survival, but the answer lies in the very structure of their society. Our ancient ancestors did not live in sprawling, anonymous cities. For nearly all of human history, the basic social unit was the band, typically a tight-knit group of just 20 to 30 individuals, often consisting of several related families. In a world this small, you knew everyone intimately. There were no strangers. And in a group this small, facing the immense pressures of the Paleolithic world, every single person mattered. Within this tiny, interconnected world, a powerful set of rules developed that was essential for their collective survival. The most important of these rules was reciprocity. Sharing food was fundamental, creating reciprocal obligations among every member of the group. This system was their social glue. It meant that the food a hunter brought back wasn't just his, it belonged to the band. This culture of sharing created a powerful safety net. The person you help today might be the one who saves you tomorrow. This is the world that cared for the man from the cave. His clan kept him alive because that was the system. The compassion they showed him was the same compassion they would extend to a hunter who fell and broke a leg, or a mother weakened after childbirth. It was an investment in the integrity of their group. Caring for the weak wasn't a burden that drained their resources. It was a reinforcement of the social bonds that were their single greatest asset. It was a declaration that the value of the group was paramount, and that no one would be left behind. Their compassion wasn't just a feeling, it was their most effective survival strategy. It is easy for us, in our modern world, to measure a person's worth by what they can produce or contribute physically. But this view is a modern invention. The survival of the man from the cave forces us to reconsider what true value means. The members of his band did not see a useless burden when they looked at him. They saw a father, a brother, and perhaps most importantly, a living library. While his body was broken, his mind was a priceless reservoir of the extraordinary knowledge breadth their lifeways demanded. He was the one who remembered where to find specific plants during a drought. He knew the subtle signs of a changing season and the ancient stories of their people, the tales shared around the fire that taught the children their cultural and practical knowledge. This vast ecological understanding was passed down through generations, and he was a vital link in that chain. His experiences were the group's data, his memories, their hard drive. Every day he lived, he paid his clan back with the one thing that could not be easily replaced: wisdom. And so we arrive at the ultimate answer to our mystery. The man from the cave survived because his life had inherent value beyond his ability to hunt. He was not a liability, he was a legacy. His survival reveals the greatest secret of our species, the innovation that truly allowed us to conquer the planet. It wasn't a sharper spear or a hotter fire. Our most powerful survival tool was, and has always been, the compassionate, cooperative community. It was the profound understanding that the group is stronger when it protects all of its members, and that sometimes the most valuable knowledge comes from the person who can no longer walk the path himself. So, the story of the impossible skeleton was never about one man's struggle. It was about his community's strength. The evidence is undeniable, written in the healed bones of our ancestors. The instinct to care for the weak and dying is not a modern invention. It is one of the oldest and most fundamental traits of our species. The popular image of the fur-clad brute, living a life of selfish violence, is a fiction. When we look at the archaeological record with fresh eyes, we see not primitive monsters, but innovative and resilient humans whose solutions laid the foundations for all subsequent human achievements.